Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday. It is Professor Weed Wednesdays. And sure enough, we've got another educator, entrepreneur waiting to be interviewed by us. His name is Ulysses Youngblood. Ulysses, thank you so much for joining us here on Cannabis Chat on Wednesday.
Jimmy, so happy to be here with you guys, and I appreciate you extending the invite to be here.
So, you work at Clark University as an adjunct professor, correct?
I do, absolutely. I teach an entrepreneurship class, actually two entrepreneurship class under the School of Management, and then I also teach a few cannabis courses that's under the Masters of Public Administration, which is a graduate level course.
There you go. Do you want to give us a few names of those courses that you are an instructor of?
Yeah. So the first one is Art of the Pitch. And that is more or less a sales class. And then I just wrapped up another course, which is called, what's the other course? Creating a Movement, which is more of a marketing class. And then in the springtime, I'll be teaching a capital raising finance class. And then I developed this summer and for this semester a social equity class in cannabis. I also taught a regulatory framework class in cannabis. So the cannabis classes are graduate level, like I said, under the Masters of Public Administrations here at Clark. So it's cool to be in two different schools, policy and business, but I'm definitely a business guy through and through.
I want to ask how challenging it was for you to pitch those courses. Um, and of course, they know that you're involved with the cannabis world. So, how challenging was that?
It wasn't challenging at all, to be honest with you. I would say for the entrepreneurship. In fact, let me back it up. So I got involved with Clark through cannabis. I got asked once we got our host agreement here in the city of Worcester. There's a really good guy. His name's Jacob Sanders, who was a graduate student here at Clark, as well as working in the city of Worcester under the city manager's office. So once we had signed a host agreement with the city, he was like, "Hey, it'd be great for you to be interviewed for this class that I'm developing." And that class he was developing was for the master's, the certificate program that Clark has. So they already had, you know what I mean, like a program for cannabis.
Hmm.
And then once I realized that there was a need for him to interview me, I saw that there was a need for entrepreneurship classes in terms of adjunct professors as well. So yeah, Clark was very open to cannabis because they had a program going on before I got involved.
And you mentioned you're part of the social equity applicant pool, the economic empowerment pool in the state of Massachusetts. And you did kind of hint that you actually have one of those valuable delivery licenses. Is that accurate?
So we have a certificate at this point. We have
Okay.
a certificate, and yes, but we will be licensed with it. There's absolutely no question.
And as we both know, the exact regulations and rules are still being ironed out by the Cannabis Control Commission, some influential others in this process, let's just say. Where do you stand on what you would like to see as far as the abilities to have a viable license, I mean, a viable business with that delivery license?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it is a little bit different because we do have a manufacturer's license, provisional license. We do have a retail license, and we're in the middle of doing a build out right now as we speak, 5 miles down the road from Clark University here. So I will be open and say that we're in the middle. I know some of those guys that are special interests in saying, hey, we don't want all this power for delivery. But then I know businesses that are social equity, economic empowerment, and this is their way in, right? Is to
Mm-hmm.
get a delivery license. So my gut tells me that the barrier should be lowered, no question about it, right? So that means being able to buy wholesale. I would love to see some packaging components thrown in there. But we know that on the other end of it, we have some groups that want to basically peel those ideas back.
or
So
or at least adapt them. Do you find that you're running up against a brick wall at this point, or do you think there's some movement here?
So me personally, man, I run through big walls. But like I said, it's for us, it's different, man, because I trust me, I do know some big money guys here in Worcester, and they're like, we don't want this, right? Because it's gonna cut into our profits for retail. But then me, I'm like, yes, I'm building out a retailer, but I'm an EE. We're gonna have a delivery license. So put it this way, Major Bloom, me and Lori's business is positioned to outlast any decision, and I mean, it's just honestly just the fate, a lot of faith, and the fate that just way things rolled out this way that we're positioned to outlast it.
Well, as you know, I've met Lori Lucien, your partner there,
Absolutely.
and I've always enjoyed her passion for this industry and the movement and all this. And I think it's great that you're already established in Worcester. There are quite a few other brick and mortar dispensaries, adult use dispensaries, or wait, as you like to call them, establishments. Is
No,
that
no,
right?
we are the establishment because it's not just retail,
Gotcha. And,
right? So
right.
our house is the establishment,
I get you. I understand that. And in that establishment, will
right?
you be showcasing some of your clothing line?
That's a great question. So there's room for it. I think that there's room for it, especially some of the partners that we work with. And I'm just a kid of the culture, right? So I love hats, bandanas, t-shirts, hoodies, man. Like, so I think there's room for it, definitely. So showcasing is a good way to put it. Absolutely.
And,
I'm saying
and
yes to that.
okay, cool. And I'm also recognizing that there's going to be some competition amongst the Worcester area establishments that
Right.
are selling their wares, if you will.
Really?
How are you going to differentiate what you do? And obviously, I'm going to guess showcasing your clothing line might be a good way for you to differentiate, right?
So when you say showcasing, you said what competitors?
Yeah,
Run
and
that.
how are you going to compete with those other
Got you.
dispensaries
Yeah.
in the Worcester area? How do
Yeah.
you differentiate why people should come to your place rather
Right.
than their place?
That's a great question. And honestly, the first thing that comes to mind when you say competition is a blue ocean mindset. I don't think, are you familiar with that? Blue
No, but
ocean,
explain
red
that to me
ocean?
because you are a very deep. You've got all these quotes of Michael Jordan and Albert Einstein. I did some
Yeah.
research on you.
Oh, my website you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are some of my favorite people. But yeah, blue ocean mindset is really looking at competition as it exists, is that it's a wide range, right? Meaning that if you're in a blue ocean, like there's no end to it. Like everything looks, endless. Where red ocean is more cutthroat, like, hey, this is very rigid, maybe like a price war, different tactics that are involved with red ocean and it really competing in that sphere. I think if all of us in Worcester, and not only just Worcester in the state, look at it from a blue ocean mindset, meaning that we all have our own lane, then I know, that's the way that is better for consumers, to be honest with you. So for us in Lori and I, it's for us, it starts with being connected to the community and seeing that we know that we're much different than many other business owners, very involved in the community. I live 5 minutes away from the facility that here in Worcester. I got initiated by the Worcester Police 5 minutes down the road. They beat my ass a couple of years ago. So for me, this is a full circle of basically what's going on in the world. Right, we are in some issues sometimes that are very socially pressing, especially as what it means for people of color. Not only in cannabis, but just in general. So for us, is really being able to tell that story of how the social atmosphere that we're in, and putting it in front of consumers to know that they're doing business with a great group rather than special interest group, an out-of-state group, a multi-state operator. That's the story, is really connecting with the community through authenticity. And I have no better way to connect with the community than to tell real stories.
would you like to expound a little bit on what happened with the Worcester law
Oh,
enforcement?
absolutely. I love talking about it. Yeah.
Tell me.
So this is my second home. And I say this to people that I got initiated here because I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I moved here in 2006 to go to Assumption College to play football more specifically.
Yep.
But I ended up getting kicked out of Assumption College because of weed related things, right? Like they said my dorm room smelled like weed. They kicked me off my campus. Then I ended up moving to Salisbury Estates, if you're familiar, which is not too far from our location.
Yep.
And I got the cops called on me and my friends. I ended up getting arrested for disturbing the peace. And then I got police brutality. They beat me up. And this was all in like '07 or so. Yeah, man. So the fact that I got kicked out of college for something weed related, the fact that I was a part of police brutality, but then here we are 13 years later. Here I'm a professor in the same city. You know what I mean? I have a business coming up in the same city. That to me answers the question of differentiation. It's the authenticity being rooted here in the community, right? Like I know some of the guys that we've grown up with are multi-billion-dollar corporations. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, it's just a little different, right? I'm not hiring an analyst to do the work. It's me and Lori and my intern Jill over here.
Well, I know how smart Laurie is, and I'm going to just go on a limb based on the quotes that you have on your website. You're pretty deep, man. You really are. I guarantee you that having Albert Einstein, Michael Jordan,
Right.
Nipsey Hussle, who I had no idea who it is, but now I do know who it is. But it's the Dr. Seuss quote that really hit home with me. Now I'm going to read it, okay?
Yeah,
and I
please
want
do.
and I want to talk. I want to talk to you about it because I embrace my weirdness. It is definitely one of the things that gives me my identity, my personality, and I really don't care. But this is what it says. This is Dr. Seuss talking, not necessarily Ulysses Youngblood, but he picked this quote.
Yeah.
We are all a little weird, and life's a little weird. And when we find someone whose weirdness is compatible with ours, we join up with them and fall in mutual weirdness and call it love. I think that is a beautiful quote.
I agree, 100%.
So who's
Right.
weird in your life?
Everybody, my wife, my mom, my business partner, my intern. We're all weird.
Basically, the word is synonymous with unique,
Right,
right?
100%. Yeah,
Because if you stand out, and some people who judge you, and by the way, I'm not big on judging anybody, okay?
absolutely.
But you stand out for some reason, people might think that's unique
Right.
or even label it weird, depending on why you're standing out. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah.
That being said, it's a challenge for you just walking down the street. If I was walking down the street and you were walking down the street and a police car happened to drive by, who's going to get picked on? Who's going to get stopped and say, hey, what you doing? Or right?
I think the difference is that we know the answer to that question. We're trying to fix that, right?
Right.
And especially when it comes to cannabis, it's like, oh, we all know the statistics. Black people get arrested at exponentially, more rates depending on what county that you're in and what state, but it's really addressing those challenges with solutions, because it's tired to keep repeating the same thing over and over again. It's like, what are we doing to make things better at this point,
Well, I will say this. Without knowing the result of the presidential election yet, because we are live at this point, we do know that the cannabis industry picked up 5 for 5 on their ballot questions yesterday. And that's a huge win for this industry because it means, I believe it's 3 more states are now adult use legal and 2 more add in for medical. I think that was the score. And South Dakota was the first state to get both medical and recreational passed on the ballot. So there's kind of I'm guessing 420 on Wednesday is going to be a big celebration.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Are you encouraged with those results as an entrepreneur and a businessman? Are we going to break down the stigma finally, you think?
Yeah, well, I think that the stigma has been there. It's just, not existing. Oh, well, I shouldn't say not existing. I think some of the studies we look at, 60% or 65% of people in the United States are for legalization. So, yeah, the stigma is definitely changing. It's more about policy and politics at this point,
And I don't like politics, just in case you haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, me either. We're friends. We're together on that, man.
Fair enough. Well, I think we're more together than you think we are, Ulysses. Okay, first of all, our last names are derivatives of each other, right? I mean, I could be a Youngblood.
Let's go. Add it to the end. See what people think of you.
What is the schedule? What do you got? You got some goals for when you think you're going to be operational and all this?
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because I spoke with my GC today, and we'll probably be done with construction come January, February. And, after the construction is done, we have to have a host of inspections on the local level and the state level. So without the doubt, the goal would be, end of February, Marches. I would say February.
What's the one thing you'd like to see change in the Massachusetts area when it comes to cannabis?
One thing. Wow, I would have to say being in the economic empowerment program, and I could say the same for social equity. I think all the social programs have a good intention. I think that there needs to be some change around, basically who it's intended to, improve and help out. Because I say that, and going back to the point of, being in Worcester where we've been up against, billion-dollar corporations, having expedited licensing is cool, but we still have to go through everything else that all other businesses have to go through: host agreement, special permit, construction permitting, and all everything that we just mentioned costs money. You know what I mean? So I think the big challenge is funding. I mean, and it seems obvious, literally seems obvious, but it is a challenge for economic empowerment and social equity businesses.
And it's interesting you brought that up, the funding part, which we all know is probably the biggest obstacle to opening and going through the whole regulation process and all that. But I also know how restrictive marketing policies are in this space too. And, besides your sign, look, I'm going to guess that you're going to leverage your entrepreneur spirit and your clothing line as a way to get people into your establishment.
Yeah, I would say there's probably more than it's more, and I talk about this often, is ancillary businesses, right? Or ancillary adjacent, I like to say adjacent services or products. So, I mean, in many cases, that could be music. Cannabis and music culture run, together through and through. Sports, another one that runs to parallel paths. So I think it's more important, and that's why you talk about the clothing and things of that nature. The culture. I think it's more important to focus on those things to help drive the brand, rather than saying, "Hey, we have the highest THC content." You know what I mean? Come get 2 for $25. Like, no, that's not compelling enough for people.
That's right. And besides, if you know something about cannabis these days, it's about the terpenes and the impact with the
Right.
amount of THC in the
Right.
plant, right?
I guess. Yeah. I'm not a science guy.
Yeah, and by the way, I've interviewed more scientists in the last year and a half than I ever met in my entire life.
That's
As a
great.
former
Did you learn
sportscaster,
anything?
what's that?
Did you learn anything?
Oh, I've learned so much. In fact, they
That's great.
use words I've never even heard before. Okay.
Right.
So I tried to ask them to dumb it down to somebody who was a sportscaster and a history major and,
Right.
was in newsrooms my whole life. So I just try to make it so that they can actually learn how to talk to the public because
Absolutely.
not having public service announcements talking about the benefits of this plant and how it can enhance your life still
Absolutely.
is, I think, is a big factor for the industry. I've been preaching this now for as long as I've had this microphone on again. So
Absolutely.
I hope that eventually happens, not only in Worcester, but in the entire industry. Because there's still so much knowledge out there. People are still learning about this plant, even at the highest scientific level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes me think of when you talk about like layman's terms and understanding the science. There's a great gentleman that you should probably get on this show as well. His name is Gene Ray. And I bring a lot of admiration for him because he's also a black male working in this industry. And I love being around people that know more than me. He is a person that is he's a weed scientist, and I love saying that. And he's, like I said, another young black dude. So I understand when he talks about cannabis, but he's just super knowledgeable when it comes to, laboratory extraction process and things of that nature, the science side of things.
Well, we'd love to interview him because he would be able to educate us on Wednesdays or talk about his science and medicine that he's obviously on Mondays. Those are the two different. We have a medicinal Monday show and a Professor Weed Wednesday show. So if you make that intro, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
But speaking of,
100%.
let's talk about the guy who actually made the intro to the two of us, if you don't mind. Was he
Yeah.
was David Monty a student of yours?
He was more than a student, man. He was a leader, to be honest with you. The guy, I think what's really cool about him is I like to understand people's backgrounds, and I know he has a brother that also works in the industry. So I feel like he got a lot of knowledge from his brother, and he brought that into the classroom and talked and spoke so diligently. He's a great writer. I think I told him this like every assignment that he would pass in is that I really, to your point, like understood what he was saying when it came to different regulations. It made sense. He made great recommendations. So not just a student, just a leader in the class that we had together.
Well, we certainly are glad that I've finally reached out to him, had an opportunity for him, and he is working with us in the future. And I'll tell him that his professor gave him a good recommendation too.
Absolutely. That's great.
All right, Ulysses Youngblood, how can people find out about you? Tell them about your website, where they can go.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys can find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Ulysses Youngblood. You guys can find me there. My Instagram is UJ Youngblood. My website, as you had mentioned, Mr. Young, is ujyoungblood.com. And then you can find our business, themajorbloom.com. And then same thing across all platforms, social media, The Major Bloom as well. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the whole nine.
There you go. I found you pretty easily. And more importantly, do me a favor, call me Jimmy, because when you address me with respect, and I appreciate that because I know that's important to you too, it just makes me feel old. And I have that last name. I embrace my youngness. You know what I'm saying?
Jimmy Young. Does anyone call you James or Jimbo?
Actually, my oldest friends call me James A, because A is my middle initial, and for some reason they just have always liked that. Maybe because they know me better than anybody. I don't know, but I've always was Jimmy on air, and Jimmy is an easy one to remember. And plus, it goes back to the fact that I'm 63 years old, and I want to be as young as I possibly can. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, hang around me. We'll be fine.
Well, you could certainly help me with my style because I have no style. So I'll be in touch with you about that too, Ulysses.
That's great, man. Well, I appreciate that. And weed too, obviously, when those packs come in.
You got it, man.
Some hoodies, I'll get you some weed.
Okay, I can try it, I suppose, as long as I'm not working. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Anyway, Ulysses Youngblood, thank you so much for joining us here on Cannabis Chat. And we now are going to take a break, and we're going to kind of wave the flag about some of the accomplishments that we've had over the last year here at Pro Cannabis Media. Don't go away. We've got more coming up.